that long.
Yes.
Uh-oh, they're recording us. Okay, very good.
Well, there these three people who are heartbroken that this was the class they had to miss, so we're recording it for them, and Ian is recording it to the cloud. So I will be able to send you the link.
Wonderful. Okay. Very good.
Let's give them one more minute.
Okay. Time for a sip of water. Can the people in the back hear me?
How's the sound like that? Is it okay? Yeah, they say it's okay.
All right.
I think your sound may be better than our sound. So
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
from the floor, we'll see how that goes, whether one of us needs to repeat it or however we do it. Guys, I'm not gonna hop up with my ridiculous pink cards, so if you ask Lucy a question, I'm just gonna throw this at you to cheer you on. Do you want to be the keeper of the cherry until someone gets your thoughts, and hopefully you'll pass it when you. Absolutely.
And Nancy, I'm wondering if anybody has a question spontaneously in the room, maybe they could come up and speak to closer to.
Is that a good idea? Yes, Ian says yes. Good idea. Yeah.
All right, because
We can put the hot seat or the seat of honor.
okay, that's good. We like hot seats. All right.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna get us going. First of all, thank you, my friend, for coming to visit with us. You have gotten some questions in advance that we can work with, but we also have a room full of very interested and interesting people who have watched Kings Park, and at least three of whom are using Unlocked for their papers. So you have a fan base here. Maybe we could just start with having you address the question about the making of the film, and the kind of maybe a general question about how your journey with Kings Park as a documentary, what life of its own did it take on, and how you feel like it's become a platform for good conversations.
Okay. And again, please let me know if you can't hear me. Although that's not often a problem in my life. I'm a shouter. I got quite a few really, really good questions.
So if you want, just start with those.
Okay. All right. Only because I've had a few minutes to think about them.
Sure.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I haven't done anything like this very much for the past year. I haven't spoken. And one of the things that was so surprising about Kings Park is that there was, in fact, a great demand to show it in all kinds of mental health related contexts, not just, film festivals and settings like that. And so I had a chance for years and years to travel with the movie and address really different audiences, nursing students, social work programs, medical students. I I know this must sound very dry, but for me, it was so exciting because I was speaking to the people who actually work in the field, and I was surprised by their openness. Conversely, I also got to speak with peer support organizations like Hands Across Long Island or Hallie in the movie. And that blew my mind because I realized I had so much to learn about what was happening in the world, but also about what had happened. When I got out of Kings Park, I was completely on my own. I had a family who gave me a certain amount of support, but we were fairly estranged, but I lived with them briefly. And I really had to figure things out entirely by myself. That really does not need to be true anymore, not at all. There are organizations that have been started by and run by people who have dealt with mental health challenges, who are in recovery, who know how to be open about what they've experienced, and who are involved in a social change movement to take action in ways that they think will improve conditions for people who are struggling or are in recovery. And that I'll never forget it. When organizations like that in Suffolk County, Hands Across Long Island, and Clubhouse of Suffolk, which now has a new name, reached out to me. That was phenomenal. And a little later, I'd like to talk about, despite all of the terrible problems that really do exist, from my perspective, as someone who saw the world at a time that people feel things were better, how adamantly I feel that that's not true. Things were quieter and things were hidden, but they were not better. Uh, so the film has been of value in academic and training settings. It's also been a film that's been shown in many, many, many state hospitals to the people who are patients there, quote unquote. I continue to struggle with the right word, and for the people who work there. And it's been shown in public health settings. I'm forgetting something important, but that's nothing new. At any rate,
Correction.
corrections. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Yes. I even had the opportunity to work one summer with people who were training to be correction officers at Rikers, and they hadn't started work yet. And it was a phenomenal opportunity. And I, especially remember, again, every single one of these situations, I am sure that I'm the person who learned the most when I got to go and speak. One young woman who was going on to be a CO said to me, "What you did was against the law. So it was appropriate for you to be punished." And by that, she meant by attempting to kill myself, I I broke the law. And she felt that I deserved, jail time essentially, or time at Kings Park. That thought had never crossed my mind. Punishment is a big theme in Kings Park. The punitive attitudes that we have towards the quote unquote mentally ill, but what she expressed that day and what she felt so deeply had never occurred to me. Um, but I've taken a break the past year from speaking. So this is a real pleasure. I mean, I'm delighted to be here anyway, but it's especially valuable for me to be here now because I haven't done this for a while, and hopefully I've gained some perspective. One of the questions that someone asked, and by the way, if I mishandle these questions, speak up, let me know. But what I thought I read was that, and this is all in no particular order, the writer wanted to know what was the biggest struggle that I was left with as a result of being at Kings Park. And that's a really interesting question. And the answers on the negative side are pretty obvious. I was left with a deep sense of shame. It caused me to really put away my past to the point that it was almost irretrievable. I made the decision that no, I didn't have a childhood or an adolescence or an experience in many mental hospitals. I was born the day I was finally discharged, and my life started there. And that was very helpful for a long time. But ultimately, it was very confining and was not helpful, and something I really had to overcome. And that was an outgrowth. That process was an outgrowth of shame and trauma. So the inheritance of struggle was exactly what you might expect. But the opposite of that, which I try to deal with in the final scene of the film, is that Kings Park did, from my point of view, unintentionally, give me enormous gifts. For one thing, it radically expanded my ability to see. I think when when you go through something like jail or prison or a state hospital, as I experienced it, or punitive settings like that are punishing, you can never fully accept um, that you can't forget that that is always going on, and that for much of the world, that experience is an ongoing reality. And to be that disenfranchised and that negated became part of my world. And you'd think that was a bad thing, but in my opinion, it was a good thing. It made me more empathic. It made me more thoughtful. It gave me a much more complex vision of the world. And it brought me here to speak with you today. Which goes on to another question someone asked me. And these questions came, I think, from 3 or 4 different people. If I could change something about the past, what would I change? And I'm sort of going to echo what I just said. I would change nothing. Except maybe that I would have inherited $1 gazillion. But aside from that, I would change nothing because what would I change? I believe very firmly, not firmly, deeply, that that the struggles that we're presented with are particularly able to help us if we take them on, if we take the challenges on, to grow and to evolve. And that is a point of view that really fuels my life, with constant breakdowns where I fall off the wagon and just sorry for myself. But, what would I have wanted to change? A more loving family. If I'd grown up in a different family, I'd be a different person, and I wouldn't be here answering this question. I the the real value is that I have the miracle is that in some cases I've been able to use these challenges and situations to grow. And I know that's corny, but it's my truth. So what thoughts did I have out at Kings Park when I was there? I was terrified. I can't, I've never been able to find a more forceful, powerful way to say that. That being there without preparation of any kind, in a place where I absolutely knew that anything could happen to me, anything could be done to me, and that no one would know. My family would accept whatever the hospital told them, and that would be that. And I felt completely helpless and without any means to protect myself, except to be good. I did my very best to be a good kid, a good soldier. I was terrified to do anything else and to draw as little attention to myself as possible. So my thoughts were thoughts of terror. And I tried, because I was so terrified, I tried not to think to the best of my ability. That was probably my first training in meditation. Don't think. Did I confide in other people? No, absolutely not. For whatever reason, I didn't bond with any of the other patients while I was there. The people that I met on my different wards were significantly older than me, and they had absolutely no interest in bonding with anybody. And again, I was really on my own. I did have a meeting with a psychiatrist when I first got there. She spoke very little English, which was typical of state hospital psychiatrists. And psychiatry is all about, or was all about, communication. So it was a particularly unfortunate limitation on her part, because I couldn't understand her and she couldn't understand me much of the time. And certainly we didn't have any cultural references in common because she came from a different country. And but I do remember trying to sell her on the fact that I was fine and she should let me go. And she looked at me at the end and I kind of held my breath, like, did it work? Again, I was terrified. I needed to get out of there. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not going to try to fake her accent too much. You are a very sick girl. And when I get back from summer vacation, we will start psychoanalysis. And that will take a long time. I will be back in the fall. It was June. Can you imagine the things got a lot worse in my vision of my circumstances. This was not good news. It turned out not to be true either. So there's that. Now, please, if anybody has a question or if I'm not making sense or anything, speak up.
Want to take a second? Do we have any questions from us? Lucy's got a list that people sent her and given us. that she's looking at, but we good so far? I think we're good so far. We see, keep going. Yeah.
Okay. What was hardest about going back to Kings Park? I would say the hardest thing about going back was my own self-doubt. I, more than anything I felt while I was there, I mean, I went there to feel things and to remember things and to know things. But every step of the way, from the minute I had the idea to do this, I questioned myself and I berated myself and I ridiculed myself. Um, some of you may be familiar with this pattern. I I'd say to myself, so some middle-aged woman goes back to her old mental hospital. Who cares? That was one. Do you know how long this is going to take? How dare you? What a waste of time. Who do you think you are? Um, this was constant. So it was like, um, imagine trying to live your life with a very negative stereo mechanism constantly blaring at you while I was trying to just, function. So, and so you might ask, well, why did you keep going? Why would you do this to yourself? And what even gave you the momentum or energy to keep going? The pain of doubting myself like that was, first of all, not new to me. It had come up virtually any time I tried to do anything in my life that was ever so slightly off the beaten path. So there was that. It was nothing new, but it was louder. But the other thing was the pain of stopping. That was worse. It actually felt, and I think I say this in the film, I have no idea. It actually felt the thought of stopping and not doing this made me feel like I was being buried alive. It was that painful. You can see I really love talking about pain. It's one of my things. But I and that's why I kept going. I understood how important it is. Somebody did ask what advice I would have for people who are also struggling with mental health challenges. And to that, I would say, among many other things that I'll say in a little while, but one thing while we're talking about this is nurturing your creativity and your willingness to take healthy risks is important. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, but it is incredibly rewarding. And I can look back on my life to many times where the start of a new project helped me to move beyond some kind of rut or hole that I might have sunk into. And so I would, for those people who have ideas of things they'd like to do, which they dismiss out of hand, I'd say, give that idea another glance or come up with another one. It's there. And I'd also say, do it with support. You know, a lot of people came together for this project, for this movie, and now for Unlocked. And I would say, make sure to have support, and it can be and should be mutual. So that's one point. How did we find all these people? Well, let's see. It was entirely through word of mouth, and my older sister I didn't expect my family to be supportive of this film. I do have a sister and brother. They're not in the movie because I just that was a step I was unwilling to take. Um, it would have made a complicated film like much more complicated, and I would have had to make a series, not a film. Um, she but my sister and brother were very supportive. And I think they kind of wondered why I wasn't interviewing them for the movie, but they never said so. And I she was working as a community writer at the time, and she spoke to another writer out here in Suffolk County. And the next thing I knew, there was an article about the project, which we were shooting in one of the local papers. And within 24 hours, one of the things I asked them to do was to put in something like, if you were a patient at Kings Park, or you worked at Kings Park, or you had family or loved ones there, and you'd like to share your story, contact us. We received over 100 phone calls in 24 hours. And what we did was we interviewed everybody over the phone, and then we asked to meet some of those people. And a lot of people called, but they had no interest in appearing on film. One person I remember did want to appear on film, but was just too scared. A lot of the former employees had a real fear about backlash from the state, that they were retired and they were afraid that their benefits would be interfered with, uh, and they were scared. And I've always thought that their fear of punishment, was, intrinsically related to their experience at Kings Park, where punishment was an organizing principle. It was a management style, whether you worked there or were a patient there. Um, I have no idea what this means here, so I'm going to have to skip this question. But anyway, that's how we found everybody. Oh, I know what this means. Do I still speak with the people I met? Yes, though I do have to say, for the most part, most of the people I interviewed, as you know, were very much older than me at the time, and most of them have passed on. I became very close with Lizzie, who was quite a bit younger than me. She would often remind me of that fact, I'm not as old as because I had a tendency to talk to her as a peer, which she resented. Um, but she died 2 years ago. And that's, I miss her very much. And I think a lot of people do.
Me too.
Yeah.
I still go and put stuff on her headstone.
Thank you. So, the responses to the film when we were making the film were not, for the most part, very helpful. I can remember going to an organization. It was kind of like a day program for people with serious and persistent mental illness, as they called it. And the guy who ran the program, the executive director, was a really nice guy. But right away, when I told him about my project, he said, "Who is this for, Lucy? You know, you're not like them." Them meant the people in his program. You're not like them. So your story is not really relevant. And I can remember people visiting Kings Park, in some kind of training situation, coming to our ward, and I was them. I was absolutely them for years. So I thought, if this man feels this way, how, and he's educated and wants to do good and is a kind individual, what does that say about what's happening right now? So I remember another situation where I approached a funder of health issues, and they dismissed the film because it was about mental health issues, which they considered to be unimportant. Literally said to me, Lucy, we deal with real health issues, not mental health issues, as in not made up issues. So it was hard. Times have changed in that way. I don't think I'd experience that feedback were this happening today. I think people have, many more people have received the message that mental health not only counts, but is intrinsically connected to quote unquote physical health. You don't have mental health and physical health. You have health, and they both matter. Afterwards, I really didn't expect much from the response to this film. I was not really connected to the world of mental health care. I was not very knowledgeable at all. And it wasn't until I started to travel with the film that I began to learn about all that had happened since the time of the state hospital systems. And I sometimes found it difficult to deal with the absolutely positive response that we received some of the time, most of the time. I think the most startling example of that was out at Stony Brook, the Stony Brook Film Festival. 1,200 people showed up to see the movie. They had to open a second theater, and I was thrilled, but I was also, it was sort of blew out my circuits, if you know what I mean. I didn't know how to process that. At any rate, we got some really helpful and thoughtful questions here at the end. But again, I just want to touch base. Does anybody have something they'd like to say or ask at this point? Because I really am organizing what I'm saying around what you asked me.
Well, why don't you come a little closer to them? Sorry. Wherever you're coming.
I'll just be right here first.
Oh, that's good. I couldn't do that.
Okay. Yeah, it's like someone said like, oh, we deal with like real health problems and not mental health problems. Like, I would be like so mad if I heard that. Like, that just hearing that just sent me into like,
Yes, I hear
Like-
you. I hear
I
you.
was shocked.
Yeah,
So that's,
okay, it's a good.
I think that's great, because that really speaks to the fact that things have changed. And in this regard, for the better, that's a shocking idea to you, that someone would have that point of view about mental health problems and disorders. Anybody else? Comments, questions? Okay. I'm going to keep going then. You asked for it. Somebody asked about stigma, and how can we address the stigma that we see in our local communities? And is it, the person said, we can talk about things, talk about our own experience the way I'm trying to do, and share and try to be open. Is that really the whole story? Is that enough? And, I do have some suggestions. One is look inside. To what extent do you feel a prejudice about mental health disorders? For instance, if you struggle with depression or anxiety or other related problems, do you feel privately some shame about that? I mean, that's certainly stigma. Do you feel it's your fault? Do you feel it reflects a shortcoming? Um, uh, something wrong with you in addition to, it's not enough that you might feel anxious, but then it's more to know that that anxiety expresses um, uh, something wrong with you. And do you judge other people
Mhm.
for having those challenges? Do you dismiss this? Like, do you not take them seriously? Do they irritate you? Are you impatient? Are you frightened? And if so, why? And I'm not saying this kind of fear is invalid. I'm just asking you to explore yourself, to explore. I remember I used to attend this group, and as a gay person, we would explore internalized homophobia, which was really interesting because to what extent do I harbor the same prejudices that I think society has towards me? Well, similarly, whether you deal with mental health problems or not, do you have internalized negative judgments or prejudice? Um, challenging yourself in this way is really powerful. And doing it by yourself or in a group is a really powerful thing to do, journaling about it, because to the extent that we're not crippled by these kinds of feelings and attitudes is the extent to which we can participate in the world more fully. Um, Prejudice like that really narrows your scope. And if you think that people in the mental health field do not harbor stigma, you would be very wrong. But I think there's so much more awareness of this today than there was all those years ago, and that I'm talking about. And there was no such thing as mental health stigma. There was just, reality. And this was not part of that reality. Another thing I think that you could do is to look around you and see in your community, do you see ways in which mental health stigma is at work? If there's a counseling clinic, do you see it there? Do you see it, or do you see the opposite, that they're working to challenge those kinds of negative concepts? Do you see it, I don't know, in stores, in the classroom, in, the general hospital? But if there is a powerful example of that, maybe do something about it. Also, I think if you're interested in addressing stigma, it would be good to find out what exists locally on a grassroots level to support people with mental health challenges and become aware of the work they do and maybe even support them in some way.
See, Lucy, we have an on-campus group doing that, and they have a table in the student activity center, and it's really, I think, a really positive.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
I knew, as far as I know.
good, very good. I was asked in my own mental health journey, what is the biggest obstacle you've encountered? Access to help, alienation, internal struggle. That's a big question. I would say right off the top, alcohol and drugs. That made my recovery very slow. I didn't get sober until I was 40. And that was a game changer because all of a sudden I was nowhere near as numb as I had once been. And I found to my dismay that most of my feelings were the feelings of a teenage girl instead of a 40, 41-year-old woman. So that was a big journey with a huge impact and really fueled my recovery. More importantly, however, I would say that I overall had no ability to deal with pain. If I felt emotional pain, I would do anything to stop it, which is not the same as dealing with it, which is not the same as growing and becoming more capable of taking care of myself. I could not feel painful emotions. And I have consciously and deliberately learned, first of all, I had to accept that pain was unavoidable, that, the sitcoms that I watched so voraciously were not the truth. They were wonderful, but not accurate. And, I'm talking about the sitcoms of the 50s, that it's not just my family that doesn't resemble Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you know what that is, but the happily ever family, or the Cosby Show or whatever. So I had to find out that pain was going to come. It's a part of life. And I had to learn to feel it. And I had to feel it to the best I could, without creating stories about it. I feel this bad because I'm a jerk. I feel this bad because I flunked my test. I feel this bad because, and there were always reasons. And that's the thing, there are always reasons. But what was really at work, and the reasons fuel the pain. But could I just feel? And I don't know if this makes any sense. And this is just, they asked what helped me. So I'll just keep going. I had to learn that this moment was just that, this moment. It was not the truth about the rest of my life. And so I began to be able to relate to circumstances, really hard circumstances, a moment at a time, understanding that things were in process. And that made a very big difference.
Can I Can I ask a follow-up question here? Because, I mean, this is something you and I have talked a lot about, but what did you find in terms of, I mean, you're describing mindfulness as a practice. It's like, where did you first come across that? Because it's not something people our age had ever heard of, but so like, do you remember the moment that, you know, someone, okay, tell.
I actually do, and I'm surprised that it's not in the movie. Or maybe it is, and I've forgotten. That actually happens.
Yeah.
Um, it happened at Kings Park, and that is, I allude to it at the ending, but not in the detail that I'm going to now. When I got there, as the child of a mother who had escaped Russia and the Cossacks and come here, she was not a Holocaust survivor, but she had a brutal childhood in Russia. And I felt like I grew up in this pretty suburban landscape where I was being told stories about the millions of people who were killed in ovens because they were Jewish. And then, by the way, there's a new thing called an atomic bomb about which you can do absolutely nothing. And there was a lot of reason then, as there is today, to be very frightened. And so I had terrible suspicions that this pretty world that I was living in was fake and not real. And that was confirmed for me when I arrived on Ward 210 and where I sat down on the floor because there was no place else to sit. And then they would come with their sticks and make you stand up because you're not allowed to sit on the floor. And again, not to beat a dead horse, I was scared. I was terrified. And I thought that this feeling would absolutely destroy me, that I would in fact go insane from the terror I was feeling, experiencing. And I just thought, I mean, I didn't think, I surrendered. What else could I do? There was no way to seek help. There was no one to talk to. I had nothing. And sitting on that floor, I surrendered to the terrible feelings I was having. And I was not thinking. I had gone blank. It was just emotional. And out of that moment came an unbelievable experience of peace. You could have knocked me down with a feather. That was shocking. And so welcome. Can you imagine peace at that moment? But I felt at peace and I felt free. And it didn't matter for that moment that I was where I was under these circumstances. Excuse me, under those circumstances. That was the first time I felt this. Does that make sense, Nancy?
Yes, indeed.
So, and much of my life has been, I learn this, I forget,
Yes.
I practice, I forget. And for me, it is the truth that, ultimately, we really need to work on our relationship with ourselves. So, what would I suggest? Oh, and one more thing that I did learn to do or did realize was that other people were so damn important to me. what they thought of me. Did they approve of me? Did they think of me? And what did they think of me? It was like everything to me. And this was poison. I had almost no capacity to know what I thought or to give it any value. And that is something that left me a total victim. And guess what? I didn't know what other people thought of me. So everything that I drove myself crazy about was all made up. And for the most part, no one was thinking about me. But tell that to my teenage self. So that was another process. These were things that just came to me off the top of my head.
So we have about 3 minutes left.
Ah.
Unfortunately, I know. Time goes so quickly. Do we have any last questions from folks?
Come on. Okay. Well,
They're definitely paying attention. I can promise you that.
well, that's good. All I see is a bunch of like,
Yeah, we're really dark and yeah, it's poor phone quality, but it's
it's just as well. See, because I said too much about what other people think. So the last question I had, this is perfect timing. Did you overcome it? And if so, how? No, but I'm cool with it. There you go. I really am glad to be here. Nancy, thank you.
Always a pleasure, my dear.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So,
Yeah.
and Nancy has been such a source of intelligent, compassionate, brilliant guidance for both projects. And I thank you.
Back at you. Yeah. It's been a wonderful journey, and you know, this is about the 5th time that I've taught the course, and you think, well, at some point, Kings Park may just not speak to people anymore. It hadn't happened yet, so, well, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
For doing that, and if there are any follow-up questions, they can forward them and I will share them with you.
Please, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we will talk about when I can get in to see you all in person.
Oh,
And
awesome.
have Michelle come.
Pardon me?
Talking about having Michelle come from New
Terrific. That would be great.
Union.
Maybe for the Greek feast.
Oh, yeah.
Bye now. All right.
I remember that. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Okay.